and that's a full-blown war in Iran. Not only a full-blown war in Iran, I was just showing you an alert that came on my phone 3 minutes ago. An alert you'd expect to see in Israel. Lebanon doesn't have an alert system. Iran, I'm not sure if they do. But due to the current situation, potential missile threats, immediately seek a safe place in the closest secure building, etc. So it came in 3 minutes ago. You never know. End up seeing something in the background that hasn't happened yet. But here we are, Colonel. So first question, general question is, how would you describe the current situation? How bad is it? And do you expect it to get worse, or do you expect Trump to seek an off-ramp? You know him pretty well.
Well, first, let me point out that I think it was in August of 2023, I was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. I was up in Maine at his establishment, and he said, "Are we on the road to war with Iran?" And I said, "Yes. I have been saying we are headed to war with Iran for 3 years nonstop. To be perfectly blunt, I'm surprised it has taken this long." So there's no news for me in this particular development. I guess the next question is, where are we now in this process? To understand where we are, we need to back up a little bit and look at what might have been in the minds of people in the White House when they decided to join with Netanyahu and start this war. I think the first thing to understand is that you always have assumptions that people make. We're very bad at assumptions because we tend to pay more attention to assumptions that please us than we do to evidence. So I think a combination of arrogance and ignorance in the White House, coupled probably with the willingness of people in the military to provide the right answer, gave us the conflict. Another reason we're in conflict is that we mirror image. We assume that the enemy thinks the way we do, or our opponent thinks the way we do, and the opponent never thinks the way we do. And then finally, I think it was
Sorry, can you hear that? There you go.
You're not going to leave, are you?
No, I'm not going to. It's just, it's happened. A few of them have happened. But just to tell you how, for people sitting outside in the West to understand, this never happens in the Gulf. But sorry to interrupt you, Colonel.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So as a result, we have two different wars being fought. The war that we set out to fight was supposed to be short, sharp, and decisive. We were going to punish those terrible Iranians for all the threats they've made to Israel. Clearly a state of peaceful intentions with no expansionist ideas. And in setting out to punish these Iranians, we sat down with the Israelis and said, well, how do we do this? And the first thing that came up was this dumb idea of regime change, as though you could kill a few people at the top of a command structure or national structure and bring a nation of 93 million people that is roughly the size of Western Europe to heel. And then when it became clear that regime change wasn't going to work, we said, well, we'll have to double down and drop more bombs, fire more missiles, and compel them to accept unconditional surrender. That certainly has worked out well. In the meantime, the Iranians, who always knew this was coming, just as I said it, and many other people said it, had spent the last 20 years putting together a way to survive it. And that has been their goal, to survive the inevitable onslaught of American military power. And they've done it. And not only have they survived it, but they've managed to strike back very decisively against their opponents. And they have punished everyone and anyone who worked with, supported, or cooperated with the United States and Israel. So right now, the Iranians, despite all the damage that they've taken, and they have taken substantial damage inside their country, is actually in a very strong position. We, on the other hand, that have made all these strident, ill-advised demands and silly remarks, are sitting around trying to figure out what we are going to do next. We boast about destroying the Iranian Air Force. Well, the Iranians have not had an Air Force to speak of since the Shah left. Just isn't significant. Yeah. And as far as the Navy is concerned, well, we sank the 7 frigates that were the backbone of the Navy. We're dealing with small boats, and we seem to think that that's a significant achievement. And I was listening to General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, read from what sounded like a spreadsheet from an accountant and tell us about all the sorties that have been flown and all the thousands of places we've struck and dropped bombs, as though this was a metric for success. We've learned nothing since 1965. We went through this in Vietnam. I remember as a young man listening in 1969, 70, 71 to similar officers in uniform stand there and tell us, well, today we flew this many sorties and we dropped these many bombs and this much tonnage. And the entire time we were doing this, we were losing the war. Nobody seemed to understand that until it was too late. I think now we are genuinely in a state of confusion. And I think that President Trump, as you point out, very definitely is looking for an off-ramp. The problem is no one's going to give it to him. He can't get it. And the Iranians are in no hurry to end this because they are winning.
Now, how do you determine winning?
If you want.
So when you say Iranians are winning, by the way, I've made this statement many times that Iran doesn't want to end this war until they inflict enough damage to deter any future war. But it's hard to really tell how much success, though, the U.S. is having. Obviously, CENTCOM will put out reports that they've destroyed, or especially Israel, 70, 80% of the missile launchers. Iran would say, no, that's not the case because they have them underground. Seeing the amount of bombs that were dropped on the country, the amount of targets that were hit as well, and how the amount of missiles being fired have dropped significantly, even more than the 12-day war, about 95% drop. Is it fair to say that their missile launching capabilities have been degraded, but their drone manufacturing capabilities are still there, and that is their best bet to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut, to keep striking the Gulf, as we're seeing right now with the alert I just got? We saw the Oman, one of the ports in Oman that was burning today. I'm sure you've seen that. These type of scenes you don't expect to see in the Gulf, and they continue to achieve that through their drones. They don't really need their missiles in today's age.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that they have undoubtedly lost launchers. The dramatic degradation that you're talking about, I question, because every time somebody talks about the degradation, they launch Khorram Shah 2 or 3 missiles with 1,000-pound warheads that then devastate the target wherever it is. I think what you're seeing today is that they have very precise weapons. If they fire at something, they're going to hit it. It's the exact opposite of what President Trump said the other day when he said, well, they're not very accurate. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're extremely accurate. And they don't have to fire as many missiles as they previously did to reach the target. And remember, they also fired a lot of missiles at the beginning of this thing in order to deplete the arsenal of anti-missile missiles, which were in Israel and the Gulf Emirates and states, as well as with the Navy at sea. And I think they've succeeded. I mean, I'm sure that we are getting close to the bottom. This is before we reload in great numbers. We started, I think, with roughly 8,000 missiles. I don't know where we are now. The Iranians started with 45,000 missiles. There's no evidence that they're about to run out. But what we're seeing are the best, the most accurate and devastating weapons. And I got to tell you that the engineers that I've spoken to here, and I've spoken previously to engineers in Israel that warned about this, I didn't understand at the time. This is back in 2020. But the engineers are saying that the achievements of the Iranians in missile technology are dramatic. They're impressive as hell. And everything they hit, they've devastated. Now we're shipping, as you know, a THAAD radar, and I presume more THAAD missiles and launchers to Israel. I wonder what
From
the people think. What?
From South Korea. You're talking about the ones they pulled out of South Korea. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think our position is a little less robust than President Trump and his administration would like us to believe. And I think the Iranians are being very careful now. They're looking at battle damage. They're examining it with drone footage, but also with satellite imagery. And they are now hitting things with a very specific purpose to fundamentally eliminate capabilities. I think they're also holding back to see what will happen in the near future. In other words, if we are stupid enough to attack Karg Island, which we've threatened to do, then they will launch, I think, everything that you can imagine against the oil infrastructure in the Gulf. They will, of course, push back any sort of restoration of the oil infrastructure for years. So I don't, I don't think that Iran is in a particularly bad shape. I think they've lost a lot of hospitals. They've lost schools. We've done a horrendous damage to Tehran. There's no question about it. But again, this is Persia. This country's been around for 2,700 years. It's not going anywhere. It has no intention of surrendering or capitulating. Anybody who thinks so is crazy. And I think we bet very heavily on this business of internal uprising and revolt and readiness to throw out whoever is in charge. I think if we had stayed out and not bombed, perhaps by the fall of this year, we would have seen a different government. I think the Iranians are ready to move beyond the old Islamic Republic. All we've done is slow it down. We've retarded that development. I think it'll still happen at some point, but we've made it harder on the country to do what it would have done naturally without our interference. But here's the key. No matter who comes to power now, Mario, will hate us. We've done enormous damage. We are not going to have a friend in that country for a very, very long time.
So then we're kind of at a crossroad right now. It seems that we're at a fork, or Trump is at a fork right now. Either he seeks an off-ramp, which I think based on his speech, based on the way I've seen him think and act with Venezuela and tacoing in other instances, China, Greenland, I think he's wise enough to seek an off-ramp and not admit defeat, but also twist it into a victory somehow. We've destroyed their nuclear program. We've destroyed their missile capabilities. But I've been the optimist for a while, even when we had a discussion after the 12-day war, and I'm like, this is not going to happen again. You told me it will. And I've been wrong time and time again. I never thought we'd be here. And the alternative that's being talked about is boots on the ground with a focus on Karg Island, which is where 90+% of the refining of Iranian oil happens. It just sounds disastrous to me with my limited experience.